Good morning, Endeavour, and a very happy Friday to you. We've made it, the end of another week. Now, I'm going to leave you today, on Friday, with chapter 4. And we're back in Eden City, 1858, again, the same evening. Now, yesterday, Prometheus tried to get out of this being in chains on the hillside with Zeus, didn't he, by saying he was going to find a human hero. Let's see tonight if we know where our character in 1858 fits. Just as Prometheus had talked his way out of a return to his chains, so Uncle Edward had talked his way into the house of Mr. George Mucklethrift. For some reason I keep wanting to call him George Muckletwit. That would be a rude thing to do. I may be a crook, a thief and a liar, but I'm usually quite polite, I really am. Don't argue with me, pie-face. After the dank, dark streets of Eden City, Mr. Mucklethrift's house was so warm and bright, I felt I had walked into Aladdin's cave. The butler made me take off my scuffed shoes and stand inside the door while he took Uncle Edward into the drawing room. Uncle Edward would go over every inch of that room, arrange the seating and the lighting, check the piano and even the piano stool. It would take him 10 minutes, no more, no less. A tall clock tocked in the hallway. I jumped as it began to chime 5 o'clock. I had to be back here by 5:10 with a list of the best things to thieve. Not large things, lots of small but precious things, as many as I could cram into a coffin. Yes, that's an odd thing to say. Why a coffin? Why not a sack or a suitcase, a pocket or a purse, a big brown box or a bigger browner box? Wait and see. The hall had tables with ornaments and paintings we could rip out and roll up, but the paintings were all too new. Mr. George Mucklethrift was not one of those people from an old family. His money was new. The biggest painting showed a tweedy man in a weed suit. Or do I mean a weedy man in a tweed suit? Whatever. The man in the painting had a fat gold chain around his skinny neck. Mr. Mucklethrift kept a painting of Mayor Walter Tweed in the hall. What a creep. The mayor must have been a guest, I guessed. Maybe he'd been there this evening, but I hadn't time to stand there and stare at paintings, unless they were valuable paintings. 5 rooms opened off the hall. They were warmed by cold fires, and that made me shiver. All that coal made masses of soot, and skinny boys like me were pushed up chimneys to sweep it out. A master sweep with black fingernails almost took me from the orphanage to climb the cramped chimneys of the rich. Uncle Edward offered more money and got me instead. Yes, I know what you're thinking. I'm a villain, robbing from the rich. But it's better than choking in those rich folks' chimneys. If I were caught, I'd know I'd choke on the end of a rope instead. But that would be better than swallowing black dust till I die. Somehow getting myself hanged to seem a cleaner end. There were mantel clocks and golden cigar boxes, candlesticks, dishes, cutlery, silver knives, forks, spoons, and little frames with pictures of grinning girls, black-hatted men, and well-washed women. There was fine china by the cartload, but no use to me. Throwing it into the coffin would chip and crack and crush it all. As Uncle Edward said, you can't melt china. The first time he said that, I was 6 years old and ignorant. I answered, no, Uncle, you can't melt Japan, India, or Africa either. He sighed and explained, we steal gold and silver because we melt it down. We sell the metal, not the ornaments or spoons. That way no one knows where it comes from. So when we go to China, we don't try and melt the country, Uncle. I was very young and slightly simple, as I said. Uncle Edward shook his head. When I say China, I mean China. You know, cups, plates, platters, bowls. It's what we drink from. I nodded happily. Tin cups and plates, I know. He rolled his eyes. Jim, in the orphanage you drink from tin cups and eat off tin plates. Outside the orphanage most people eat from China. Not the country, the pottery. Potty? Pot-er-e, he said. What's pottery? It's clay that must have been baked hard. Clay is mud, I cried. The rich folk eat from mud. I'm glad I'm not rich then, Uncle. That was when he walked away muttering something about selling me to a sweep. But I learned fast and I had a good memory. In the Mucklethrift house, I knew just what we could take from those rich rooms. I raced upstairs. Mr. Mucklethrift and his rich guests were in most of the rooms. I could see the gas lights spilling out from under the doors and hear them moving. But the bathroom was empty, and there were silver combs and hairbrushes, soap dishes and ivory-handled razors. Time was ticking and tocking away. I opened the bathroom door. Maids were scurrying along the landing, laden with clothes to dress the posh people. Every time a servant slipped into the room, another one would come out of another door. Time ticked on. Uncle Edward and the butler would be back at the front door, and I'd be missing. The butler would call for a search, and my spying trick would be discovered. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick. Knock. A knock at the front door. Just at that moment, the landing was empty. I jumped onto the sweeping banister and flung myself into the swift slide. I hit the whole floor just as the drawing room door opened and the butler stepped out. He looked down his icicle nose at me, crumpled on the floor. He was about to say something when the knock at the door came again. The butler crossed the hall to open it. Uncle Edward stood in the doorway of the drawing room and frowned at me. He looked out as the front door swung open. In the glare of the gaslight stood a man, a tall, thin man with a moustache as thin as a bootlace. He was wearing a uniform with a bright badge and brighter buttons. His cap had a smaller badge. "Good evening, Sergeant, the butler said. "What can I do for you?" The policeman leaned forward and his chicken neck stretched out. "I've come to warn you there's a cunning pair of thieves in the area." I glanced across at Uncle Edward. Thin strings of fog seemed to slide past the policeman and wrap themselves around Uncle Edward's collar. He closed his eyes and held his throat, and he could already feel the hanging rope tight around it. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Endeavour. What is going to happen to Uncle Edward and our storyteller? And it will surprise you not that on Monday we join our story, Chapter 5, back in Greece, where the dawn of time has rolled on to the morning of time. See you all soon. Have a great weekend.